I love my title of today's presentation, Our Salons, Our Joseph. So I think you're doing Diamond Sutra. What did you decide?
Well, we're doing Mudra and the Diamond Spheres today.
Oh,
And I had one supporter of this project say, oh, I love this project because it sounds like an Indiana Jones movie.
okay.
Okay, that's okay with me. Mudra and the Diamond Spheres. Here is the jacket that I was going to wear today, but it's very hot.
Yeah, and we have no air conditioning because they're working on our ducts. Not quack quacks, but
the other ones.
The other ones. So, all right, do we need to share screen? No.
Yeah, you need to share, make me the co-host, and then I'll share the screen. Okay,
so
let me just
now
go
you take over
what
the screen.
And let's go to this.
There.
Now, do you see my logo?
Yep.
Okay, let me make it big. You see the big logo?
Yes.
Big logo.
Hey. Okay, I'm going to talk to you today about mudra and the diamond spheres. Does everybody know what mudra are? They're the hand gestures that you see in Asian sculptures and Asian paintings, classical Indian dancing, Thai dancing, Cambodian dancing. They're the spiritualized, esoteric hand language of very ancient times, older than Buddhism. So mudra are these beautiful hand gestures. The diamond spheres is my punchline. So I'm going to give you the diamond spheres at the end, but I think it will make sense. So let me just get some of these pictures off my screen here. Let me just go back here and shrink my screen to me. Hey, there we go. Okay. So our new project, for which we recently got funding from the Robert H.N. Ho Family Foundation in Hong Kong, with additional funding from the Kipper Family Foundation, begins now. And this is the first time I've spoken publicly about our new project, Mudra and the Diamond Spheres. It's a 4-year project, and I'm giving myself the blessing of Shoma so that I can talk about a lot of things really clearly today, because there's a lot of things to talk about. Well, what did I do? Let's just go back to play again, and this should go. Why am I doing
Maybe you need to go over to the slides.
I am on my slideshow, but it's not, maybe it's not working. That's very funny.
Try the right arrow.
Yeah, let me try the right arrow.
Yep, that didn't work.
I'm now, it's on my host. I've just been going through this one, and I did it last time just fine. Well, there we are. Now let me go. No.
There.
It should have.
Well, we had it for a minute.
We had it for a minute going backwards. Okay, everybody, I'm going to close this. Close your eyes, everybody. Let's see if I can get this to go backwards. Sorry about that.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, now I begin. This is Tabo Monastery, and this is the oldest operational monastery in India in the Himalayas, founded in 996. And this is what Tabo looked like in 1933 when the Italian explorer Giuseppe Tucci came upon it. It was really sort of in ruins, and there were only 2 monks living there.
You don't mean Kabul?
T-A-B-O, Tabo, yep.
Okay.
Tabo. And
I immediately go to Afghanistan.
Right, this would be, as we'll see in a minute from a map, but this picture, it's very difficult to take pictures of the Himalayas, to really get a picture that captures the grandeur of them. This is Tabo village and Tabo monastery from a distance along the Spiti River, which connects to the Sutlej River, but this is really sort of what the Himalayas look like. And if you see a village, you see the scale of nature and the scale of man. But this gives you a good sense, again, a photograph from 1933. Now, I want to let you know where Tabo is. If you look on the upper right, you see that black lake, that black line on the upper right? That's Pangong Lake, where the Chinese are attacking in India these days. Okay? Are you with me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now, if you look at the word Ladakh and the letter A, L-A, there's the town of Leh.
Right.
And I know some of you have been to Leh. So
Yeah.
that's the capital of Ladakh. Now, if you go to the end letter, Ladakh with an H, and go down from the H, straight down, you're gonna go through Somoridi Lake, down to the word Spiti. And at about 4 o'clock from Spiti, you see the word Tabo, T-A-B-O.
Oh, yes.
That's where Tabo is. Now, if you will follow me to the word Kinur, and you look to the end of the word Kinur, there's an R. And at the end of that R is something called the Shipki Pass. That pass is where most of the Western explorers entered into Tibet. It's one of the few places where you can enter into the high Himalaya. And that's China. So the Shipki Pass is the line between India and China. So Tabo is right on the border with China, right on the border with Tibet. If you look at the insert map, you'll see that that this area is smack in the Himalayas. And it's the contested area now between China and India. And one of the reasons that everything else from the 10th century has been destroyed, because the Chinese destroyed everything. And Tabo is in India, so it didn't get destroyed. So it is a rare extant example of 10th century art, 11th century art through the 13th that only exists in a couple of other locations. But this gives you a little bit of an understanding of how remote it is and how you might say dangerously close to China it is. This is Giuseppe Tucci's caravan in 1933, and you see it stretches from one end of the screen to the other. And in these days, and in most historical days, people traveled along rivers. That's how they traveled. But this is nothing but a bunch of broken rocks that have fallen down, and animals and horses and mules. And this is very, very tough going. So you get a sense of what it was like for people and explorers and scholars and etymologists and art historians to try to even get to Tabo. The Singhs of Kashmir had conquered all of Ladakh. That's one of the political issues in Ladakh right now, is that it was all conquered by the Kashmiris, but they never made it to Tabo. And there were 2 expeditions, and they never made it to Tabo. So Tabo was spared being destroyed and also being ruled by Kashmiris, as Ladakh was for a long time. But you can see just how difficult it is to get there. This is a 20th century tanka of Toling, T-H-O-L-I-N-G, Toling Monastery. And Tabo and Toling were major centers of the Guge Kingdom, G-U-G-E, the Guge Kingdom ruled by Yeshe-O. And Yeshe-O founded Tabo. But here in this 20th century tanka, you see the stair-step buildings on the right, all of the different stupas from different eras. And on the left, you see this incredible temple shaped like a mandala, the biggest building in the compound. It must have been amazing. And there are ruins left at Toling today, and the paltry ruins are amazing. And Toling was known for the quality of its art. Ooh. And this is one of the things that lasted. This is from Toling Monastery. This is Vajrapani, but you see from the metaphoric implications to the iconography, to the painting technique, the delicacy and the refinement, the level of art is very, very high. Toling was destroyed by the Chinese. And so the art at Tabo becomes more important because there are just so few records. This is what Tabo looks like today. And you see it's been restored to its original condition by the Archaeological Survey of India, who has some kind of authority over the site. And they restored it. Here's another picture of what Tabo Monastery looks like today. And it's so interesting because it doesn't look like a Buddhist monastery when we think of the word Buddhist monastery. And yet this is the oldest extant operational monastery in India. This is what they look like. It kind of looks like Santa Fe. Slightly different looking place. Now, here's another thing just to get you a handle on the assembly of buildings here. The main temple is what we're going to talk about. It's right in the middle. And then there are all of these buildings that you see with names in them. They all exist today, and they all have exquisite art from the 10th to the 13th century in them. So it's quite extraordinary. If you remember the opening picture and how dilapidated everything was, the inside was still this incredible jewel of art. And Tabo also is known for the very high level of its art and the unique quality and character of its art, because the great translator Rinchen Dzangpo brought painters from Kashmir and later from Nepal and India to create these incredible paintings. But Tabo actually is most well known for being a center of translation. And why that's so important is because at Tabo, the Indian scriptures were translated into Tibetan and later lost in India. So many of the Buddhist scriptures only exist in Tibetan now because they were lost in India, thanks to Tabo. So as exquisite as the art is, as rare as the architecture is, as remote as the wilderness is, Tabo is mostly known for the translation work that went on to serve the rest of the Buddhist world. This is another cella, another kind of art that's in a smaller altar behind the main one in the main assembly hall, but this looks like Donghuang, the 492 caves on the western edge of the desert in China, where the Silk Road sort of landed and exploded in art. You've got people running around in the air. You got squiggly lines like a cake. You got half bodies popping out of a halo, you know, just flying. That's so unusual. And there's a kind of freewheeling quality to this. And so this is a very interesting photograph of a painting of a sculpture, of a cella in these beautiful bas-reliefs. This is an extraordinary painting from the 9th century in Tabo at the front of this monastery. This is not a Buddhist deity. It's a pre-Buddhist deity. And so this looks like the kind of art you would see in Kushan or those cities on the Silk Road between Leh and China, between Leh and Donghuang. Look at these faces. They look Central Asian. This deity is not a Buddhist deity, but still to this day, she is the protectress of Tabo. So you see that the quality of the art, the ancient quality of the art, the unusual quality of the art are real attractions for art historians. Here's another picture just to show you the rainbow halos, the squiggly lines around the Buddha. This really looks like Donghuang. So you see there's a melange of art styles, but they're unique, they're confident, they're resolute, and they've lasted 1,000 years. But here's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. This is the main assembly hall. This is the magic in the middle of the desert here. As you see, these deities are in bas-relief, and behind them is a mural. This dates to 1042. You see the low tables on the ground and the drum? Well, imagine a row of monks sitting on one side and another row of monks sitting on another, and the same thing on the other table. So there'd be 4 rows of monks to fill this assembly hall. And what you're seeing on the walls is the Vajradhatu mandala. So it is an architectural and artistic 3-dimensional mandala. And in the middle of it, they do the ritual of that mandala. So it's an extraordinary discovery. When Tucci saw this, he went wild, okay? Because the outside looks like nothing, and in the inside, you see this incredible thing. Here's another photo that was taken more recently, and you see how some of the restoration has been done, but you get a sense of the schematic here. You've got a lot of landscapes and heavenly landscapes on the bottom. You've got these deities floating in midair in bas-relief, and you have murals of deities above.
Whoa.
This is another picture to show you a little more of a close-up what you've got. And this is just a diagram of the schemata. On the left-hand side, what you see is the central deity, which is a Vairocana facing 4 directions. So there's a 4-bodied Vairocana, and then here we go. The deities of the mandala start to play out and roll out. There are 37 unique deities with this mandala, and they're in bas-relief, and then the Maya deities of the mandala are on the mural behind. Now, I want you to look at this little diagram, and the main attraction here is a stabilizing force, and it's also been sort of a source of confusion over the centuries. There are 5 wisdom Buddhas, and the wisdom Buddhas are not really individuals. They're sort of the personality of the Buddha divided into 5 aspects of Buddhahood, you might say. And they center a lot of things. There are a lot of mandalas that are centered around the 5 wisdom Buddhas. There's a lot of sculpture sets. They're depicted in art a lot and used in a lot of rituals. If you look in the lower left corner of the left diagram, you see the word Akshobhya. That's one of the wisdom Buddhas. If you go up to the left-hand side on the top, you see Ratnasambhava. If you go to 12 o'clock, you see Vairocana, the 4-bodied Vairocana. There's your 4 bodies, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if you go on the right side at the top, you see Amitabha. And the right side at the bottom, Amoghasiddhi. These are the 5 wisdom Buddhas that hold up the cosmos, which I love, okay? So on the right-hand side, you see the mandala's division of colors. And you also see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the complex geography of the sequence of deities in this mandala in here from 1 to 31, but we're not going to go into that. Now, what I want to do now is teach you the 5 wisdom Buddhas with really good art. This is an absolutely exquisite sculpture. It is in the Palace Museum in the Forbidden City. Professor Luo Wenhua, who's a great, great scholar, but they don't tell you where it's from, kind of. I think this is Gugge Kingdom. It's 10th century. It's northeastern India. And probably when they sacked these monasteries, they looted it. That's my guess. But it's an exquisite sculpture. And here we go. You're going to learn the 5 wisdom Buddhas. Are you ready? Okay. The Buddha touches the ground to confirm his resolute enlightenment. And now, come on now. Oh, don't stop now. Come on now. Why are we not working? Let's try again. Oh, there we go, that worked. I can't even escape from this now.
Schematic.
Yeah,
Buddha.
here we go, here we go, here we go.
There we
Here we
go.
go. Here's the Buddha touching the ground to confirm his enlightenment. And because he's enlightenment, he wants to give to the people, so his hand is turned out. And when he wants to give to the people is the Dharma. This is the mudra of the Dharma, or the Buddhist teachings of all times, eternal teachings. And if you have the eternal teachings of the Buddha, you meditate. And if you meditate, you have protection. Let's do that again. You touch the ground and confirm your enlightenment. And so you have something to give to the people. And you want to give them the eternal teachings of the Dharma, so they will meditate. And if they meditate, they will have protection. You got that? Okay. Here are the 5 wisdom Buddhas at Tabo. And here is the first Buddha, Akshobhya. Now, there's something interesting here. The arm is not in front of the leg. The arm is on the side of the leg. And that is very interesting because it's so old. And there are so many unique things at Tabo. Nevertheless, the Buddha is touching the ground to confirm his enlightenment. But the other hand is in a very unusual swastika-like shape. Here is the Buddha saying, I'm going to give to the people. Again, the arm is not on the leg, it's on the side of the leg, but the hand is giving out. Here is the cosmic Buddha, where the Dharma is spreading out through the universe, all directions. So you have a four-facing Vairochana Buddha in the middle with the Dharma teaching and the radiant energies in the quadrants. Here you have the Buddha Amida meditating, and here you have the Buddha of protection. Let's just do that again to get that in your head. Here he's touching the ground to confirm his enlightenment, giving to the people, giving the people the Dharma of eternity, meditating, protection. Now, what's interesting is these Tabo sculptures that I showed you are the 10th century. Well, guess what? The Nepalese Charyan Ritra Newar tantric tradition has dances that are older than Tabo. This dance is older than Tabo, goes to the 6th or 7th century. Look at the blue dancer touching the ground. Look at the yellow dancer offering out. Look at the red dancer meditating. Look at the green dancer offering protection. And in the center, Vairochana with the Buddhist teachings. So we have this schemata at Tabo, but actually the Newars had this as a performance centuries earlier. Now, I went to Tabo 3 years ago, and I met the abbot. This is the abbot of Tabo. And he's talking to my assistant, Dechen Lundup. He's our field associate. He's a wonderful field guide. And I asked the abbot of Tabo, can we please come and document your dances? And he said, well, yes, you can if you want to, but why don't you come and document our Vajradhatu ritual? And here is me trying to keep up with the monks. Okay, this is me at work. This is what I look like when I'm working, Barbara. So I said, well, of course, we'd be happy to do that. We'd be happy to film your ritual. Now it's interesting, we're being asked in the last couple of years to document more rituals because over the centuries, they've simply handed them down. There's no documentation at all. So these monasteries want to document them. So we said, well, of course, we'll do that. So in the course of working on this mudra, or working on this project, the abbot sort of throws out this bone. And he's like, well, it's not dancing, but the ritual has 37 unique mudra, or hand gestures. Now look at how unusual these hands are. That doesn't look like Indian dancing. That doesn't look like monks praying. That's really an unusual shape. The way you're holding the elbow at 90 degrees, the bend at the wrists, that's really unusual. And he said there's 37 unique mudras that don't appear anywhere else in Buddhism except the Vajradhatu mandala. And so he asked me to film the Vajradhatu ritual. Now the Vajradhatu ritual is nothing but a series of flowing mudra. So when I told some of my scholar friends that I was going to be documenting the Vajradhatu ritual, they said, well, do some more research on that. So I did, and here's what I found out. In 1996, the Dalai Lama went to Tabo, and he gave a blessing. He said, hey, you guys, do you know this is the Vajradhatu mandala here? And they were like, no, we didn't know. We didn't know it was the Vajradhatu mandala. So he said, I'm going to come back and initiate this monastery into the Vajradhatu mandala. So he came back in 2003, but he wasn't well. So they repainted the statue faces and they consecrated the land. And then he came back in 2005 and brought ritual experts and taught them the Vajradhatu mandala and the ritual that goes with it. So here are the monks in 2005 doing this 1,000-year-old ritual for the first time in living memory. And you see them with their unusual mudras. Here's another photo, but look carefully. It's not as good a photo as the last one, but this is what dance researchers have to use. I look at a lot of photos like this, and it's really quite extraordinary that we have photographic evidence from 15 years ago, even to compare it to. So I learned this, that actually the Dalai Lama reinstituted this ritual in a way, putting it back into its original home, you might say. But a couple of my scholar friends, and these are top scholars, are like, it's a bunch of postmodern bullshit. You know what I mean? He made it up. And I'm like, what? You know, only someone who doesn't know anything about monks would say that. But for this erudite crowd, 2 weeks ago, Adam Skloot from the Ballet West spoke to us. And he talked about Millicent Hodgson, who reconstructed Chant of the Nightingale. Well, Millicent Hodgson has also reconstructed Nijinsky's Rite of Spring. It's popular all over the world. She's a very good friend of mine. I really admire her. But some people think, oh, hogwash. Nobody reconstituted Nijinsky. She just made the whole thing up. Well, I know exactly how she did it, but it's very interesting. Nobody thinks that what Millicent did is actually what Nijinsky did, but most people are really happy that she did it because now we have some inkling of what it must have been like. However, when I heard these scholars say, oh, they just made it up, I'm like, no, they didn't. So I got on the hunt, got in my monk network, and like, how was it possible for the Dalai Lama to reintroduce a 1,000-year-old ritual into its 1,000-year-old home? And that is the center of our Tabo project, Mudra and the Diamond Spheres. Because if the mudra in the ritual are the same as the mudra on the wall, then something is the same 1,000 years later. And for those of us who believe in movements, maybe the transmission was movement all along. Maybe the transmission never was verbal. It went to other cultures and went through different societies with different languages. Maybe it was never about language. Maybe the real meaning is in the inherent power of these mudras that can cross landscapes more easily than philosophy or more easily than language. So we decided to do a project to explore the mudra, the hand gestures, and the Vajradhatu, the diamond sphere. So part of our project, Mudra and the Diamond Spheres, we're bringing 2 ritual experts, one from the Dalai Lama's place in Dharamshala and one from South India, to help the monks at Tabo do those 37 unique mudras better than they do them now. They also did not learn how to do the sand mandala that belongs in this ritual. They use a reproduction of the sand mandala right now. So we are bringing a ritual expert to come and teach the monks how to make the sand mandala that goes with the Vajradhatu ritual. Look how complicated this is.
Woo.
So this is what they're having trouble with. So one of the things we're doing is helping them learn how to do this mandala because it's part of their Vajradhatu ritual. Now, here's something interesting. What I've been telling you about is this amazing Vajradhatu ritual with these 37 deities popping off the walls, doing 37 unique mudra, and a ritual that has these same unusual 37 unique mudra. Guess what? It got to Tabo in the 10th century. It went to Japan in the 9th century. These are photographs of Japanese Shingon monks from a study in 1960 of the same ritual that was performed in Japan before it was performed in Tabo. And guess what? The same ritual was in Indonesia in the 7th and 8th century from India before it got to Tabo. These drawings are by a Swedish Art Nouveau painter named Tira Kleen, who traveled to Indonesia at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century. I think these were done in 1919. And she was a great draftsman, and she took these incredible drawings of Indonesian mudra. And so this fascinating story of how this tantric ritual with this unspoken language of mudra got to Japan, got reintroduced at Tabo, got to Indonesia is really a fascinating story of esoteric sign language, you might say. And so we thought, well, we're going to take the point of mudra as the way to connect the paintings with the ritual, with the concept. And that is our project, Mudra and the Diamond Spheres. So now, I want to not share my screen. How do I do that? Let's just do this real quick. And, oh, sure. Let me get off my shared screen. There we are. Okay, great. Now, here's the punchline. Are you with me, everybody?
Absolutely.
Good. All I want you to do, I've told you everything except what the Vajradhatu is. The Vajradhatu is the diamond sphere. What's the diamond sphere? All I want you to do is sit up straight, straight back. Just give me a straight back. And if you can't, keep your chin down a little, okay? Now, in the center of your heart, I want you to put a four-facing Vairachana, a deity that looks all directions. Be anything you want, a little silver white deity that looks all directions, right in the center of your heart. Now, going out in front, shoot out in front as far as you want and put a deity at the end of that one. Shoot out straight and back and put a deity at the end of that one. Shoot out to the right and put a deity at the end of that one. Shoot out to the left and put a deity at the end of that one. And then run an axis right through the middle of your body. So what you've done with these 5 deities, connect them and you create a circle. Connect them through the top axis and you create a semicircle, a dome. Connect the bottom dome to the top dome and you have a sphere inside of you. That's the Vajradhatu. That's the diamond sphere. The diamond sphere is your own womb of creation within yourself. Shooting out the Dharma, shooting all directions. It's the fecund place within you where you touch your own essence of existence. Now, some Buddhists would say, that's Buddhism. Everything else is just decoration. The Buddhism is creating the space and energy and consciousness clearing, sunyata, emptiness. When you get to the essential emptiness, you've touched everything. So the Vajradhatu is not a deity. The Vajradhatu is the diamond sphere of crystalline consciousness within each of us. That's the Vajradhatu. So it's so interesting that hand gestures have anything to do with finding the womb of creation in yourself. But they do. And it's so interesting that art historians can talk forever about this art and never tell you what Vajradhatu is. And Vajradhatu is an act. It's an experience. And so the Vajradhatu is a way of blowing your own mind. It's a way of expanding your own consciousness to get to that energy field that's pure. And once you create that sphere of energy where your felt space, a lot of visualization meditation is about felt space. And what that means is, if you have a deity that's the same shape as you, and it's in your body, a little one, like a little fractal you, and then you blow it up, and the you gets bigger until the you is the same size as you. And then you keep blowing it up. And suddenly, your imaginary you is bigger than you are. It's the same shape as you, but it's bigger. And in meditation, you can feel that. You feel that space. So what's so interesting, and I think that when we have a Newar priest talking to us, he'll explain it better. Buddha's enlightenment was an experience, not an explanation. Buddhism is an experience. It's not a plan, it's an experience. So when you hear a Newar priest talking, he's like, no, anything other than the spiritual experience isn't Buddhism. It's how to get to it. It's how to get to Buddhism. So in our project, Mudra and the Diamond Spheres, we're like, well, how did Mudra even get involved in this? How it comes from Vedic dancing. It's older than Buddhism. So we're going to start off our project with a speaker series in October. And I'm going to share my screen again, and let's hope it works. And see if I can bring up my own picture here. Let's see what I can do here. Okay. Can you see my webpage?
Not
You
yet.
see a webpage here?
Not yet.
Not yet. Share.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, so we are starting a speaker series in October to look at mudra themselves. Mudra have been wildly overlooked by art historians and scholars. they're taken for granted because they're ubiquitous. They're just absolutely everywhere. The main difference for an art historian and a dancer is simple. In art, the hand gesture never moves. It's a pose. But no dancer would think of anything as a pose. It's a movement. You move into it, you move out of it. You move into it, you go over here, you go over there. You don't stop. And so the very basic difference of how did something that started in dance and ritual get into art? Because in Buddhist art particularly, anything that's physical, like a dance or a mudra, existed before it was painted. Dance is prior to painting. But we're starting this series. It will be introduced by Donald Lopez, who is the professor of Buddhist and Tibetan Studies at University of Michigan, a good friend of mine, one of the top Buddhist scholars in the world. And as pertains to our weekly conversation, the first conversation will be led by Sharon Lowen, who is a Jewish woman who has lived in India for more than 50 years and is one of India's top classical dancers. Yeah. And she studied directly with the great masters. She is respected by all of her colleagues and peers, and is a very dear friend of mine. I'm thrilled that she's doing this with us because she's great at explaining. So Sharon is going to talk about mudra in classical Indian dancing, because there's an ancient text about 2,000 years old that talks about the meaning. And again, she said it's not mudra in dancing, it's dramatic expression through the hands. It's not about poses, it's about movement. So Sharon is going to talk about mudra in classical Indian dancing. And then we move down the chronological line. Prajwal Vajracharya is a 35th generation. I'm going to say that again. 35th generation tantric Buddhist priest. And he does the oldest known performance of Buddhist ritual in the world. And this ritual goes back to about 600 AD. And he's had an unbroken succession. And this is older than monastic Buddhism. This is a lineage caste of family priests who dance. And the Newars believe that without dancing and chanting, there's no enlightenment. So for a Newar priest, mudra is part of how to attain enlightenment and emptiness. On October 21st, Tinlis Dorji was a monk for many years in Ladakh, and he got his PhD in Buddhist ritual. And he's going to be talking about how mudra are transmitted within monasteries. How do you teach them to boys? How do you teach the mudra that goes with the initiation you need for a special Tibetan yoga technique? How did the Dalai Lama give an entire monastery 1,000-year-old mudras? How did the transmission happen within the monastery system? And then closing it up is the preeminent art historian in this field, Dr. Christian Luxanitz, who was at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, at the University of London. And he is the expert in the art of Tapa. And he's going to talk about mudra and the Vajradhatu mandala. So basically, I look at this, jokingly say it's 3 dancers and an art historian, but it really is sort of 3 dancers and an art historian. So I will be sending all of you invitations to this lecture series.
Thank you.
And I think you'll enjoy it. It's at 9 o'clock on Wednesdays in the morning. Chicago's got a pretty comfortable time, but it's all over the world from Hong Kong to Delhi. So it's really spreading out. I hope you enjoyed my little talk. I knew it's still Yom Kippur today, and I wanted to respect it because I knew a lot of people had places to go. But I wanted to share this with you today, and I wanted to welcome you all to a beautiful Rosh Hashanah as well. Excuse me, Yom Kippur today as well. I know today's the day. Thank you very much.
Oh my.
Fabulous.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Wow.
Wow.
Joseph,
Yes.
you were saying that some of the, I think one of the statue you pointed out was pre-Buddhist.
Yes. That's painting, yeah.
So would that be burn imagery? I mean, how does burnism relate to this?
That's a very good question. Bon is definitely a Tibetan earlier religion. All right, I'm trying to remember. Some of you must know. There's a Bezel Cook. There's a place, a temple on the Silk Road, like Kushan or one of Turfan, one of those cities. You'll see paintings that look more like this. So I think this is more like Bun would be Tibetan Plateau, you might say, and I think this is more Himalayan Silk Road. So Bun would be Tibetan in origin, and I think that would be the difference. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And also, when the abbot of the monastery had lost the ritual, the lineage of the ritual, why would that have been? I mean, has it been inhabited this whole time, or what's happened to the?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. This is a very, very good question. And it's sort of one of those questions that no one asks. Okay, but it's the question. And in fact, yes, it's always been inhabited for 1,000 years. There have always been monks there. They have always done rituals. They've always done tantric rituals. It must have been done there. That's the academic conclusion. It must have been done there. Why wouldn't it have been done there? But the question was, can a ritual survive and transmit that way? And it's very interesting. I'm an old dancer. And I gave some books to the Hyde Park School of Ballet a while back. And I called Barbara right after I got back. And I said, Barbara, I went to the Hyde Park School of Ballet and I looked in the studio and there's 5 12-year-old girls. And they're doing tombe pas de bourrée, tombe pas de bourrée. That's 600 years old. That's a 600-year-old step. It goes back to Italy, and so, yes, it's possible to hand something down if that's what you do. You can hand it down. I know martial arts. They're very old. So we're really bringing in, one of the strengths of this project, we're bringing in people that don't talk. Dancers don't talk to art historians. Priests don't talk to monks. Monks don't talk to dancers. So we're bringing in 4 really different kinds of people, kinds of minds, really. And hopefully we can expand it from individuals to a conversation, maybe between monk scholars and Western scholars. We're trying to see what we can develop this into. There are very different attitudes toward everything, but one is, do you believe in an ancient movement tradition or do you not? And a lot of the art historians are like, you simply can't prove that a movement is old. Because in fact, dancing is always now. Dancing is in the present. How can you have an old dance? All dances are present.
Joseph,
Yes.
when you're watching a ballet be reconstructed and there are dancers alive who have danced that, it's just fascinating because, and I've watched the choreographers say, do that. And the dancer will go, no, it was done like this. Because dance traditionally has lived in the body of the dancer. And there's no reason this shouldn't be passed through the body of the dancer.
Right, you're actually right. And further, Barbara, the body becomes a repository.
Yes.
Or if you look at classical ballet, what a repository of knowledge. Some people would call ballet a science.
I'm going to be a skeptic here.
Oh,
Okay, no. I think that oral traditions or oral stories, in which dance is one thing, which is a variation of this, because instead of text, it's movement. But as these oral traditions go from centuries to centuries, invariably corruptions come into them because people don't always act or speak exactly as their predecessors did, even if they're trying to do it. Now, that said, the answer to me would be, so what? Most of it's accurate, okay? The meaning is not corrupted. And in fact, if it's a 1/4 inch this way or a 1/4 inch that way, or even a foot this way or a foot that way, so what? If that corruption entered the art form 300 years ago, and if a master of 1,000 years earlier looked at it and said, what the hell have you done to my dance? This is the way it was done. You don't put your hand this way, you put it slightly that way. Okay, so that's what happens. I mean, we see this in other art forms. It's very interesting. I'm going to bring things back to carpets because, as you know, amongst I'm a carpet.
Everything goes back to carpets.
No,
Or food.
true.
Carpet or food.
Art. But if you look at Anatolian carpets, which I've done, and you look at a 13th century or 14th century representation of a symbol, and you trace it, after all, who are these people making the carpets? Most of them are village women, and they're taught by their mothers how to weave. And variations come into these forms, and as the centuries go by, they morph into something else. And I don't want to bore everybody, but I'm just saying you can see many of these symbols which become abstracted 300 years earlier are actually animals or some other object that, and if you look at the pieces as they go forward in time, you can actually see the abstraction and see where they came from. So I'm just saying to you, I think that there probably are corruptions, or what, if that's really not the right word, because
Changes.
that would suggest intentional changing rather than simply not exactly remembering what Mama told me 50 or 60 years ago.
I watched at my mother's dinner table, Bob Joffrey and Gerald Arpino would come in every year in January. There was a March season. And at one point, David looked at Jerry and said, when you're reconstructing a ballet, what's the process? Now, Jerry was famous for redoing his own ballets. And Robert, and he's waxing poetic, and Robert is sitting at the end of the table next to Mom and says, yes, Jerry, and when you're through fiddling with it, I have to put it back together correctly.
So I don't know much about this at all, and someone will correct me if this is not true. But when I was studying briefly the Mahabharata at the University of Chicago's continuing education program, one of the things that I seem to remember being told was that when it finally came to be written down, and they went to a variety of, I don't know what you call them in that context. For the Greek, it would be rhapsodes, but people who were saying this from an oral tradition. The difference between the different renditions was absolutely minuscule, you know, and it occurs to me that it may have something to do with how important it is to transfer something accurately and completely. And so please correct me if that's not true.
No, I want to respond to that because I think that's really important. I think there's a difference too, going back, Alexander, what you were saying. I think there's a difference in an art tradition, you want to change it, you change it. But there are some traditions where you're told, don't change it.
Right.
And I think there's a little bit of difference there. When we worked in Bhutan, we had this very interesting situation. We wanted to get the judges and the cops and the monks and the police and everybody together because they were having issues with their festival. So we're like, get everybody together, we'll get everybody together. And so this villager, and they have this thing in Bhutan where any person could go talk to the king. Anybody, you can make an appointment and talk to the king if you have a grievance in Bhutan. So they have this very super respect. So this farmer gets up and starts talking, and he talks for 20 minutes. And I'm thinking, oh my God, everything's spinning out of control. No problem. The next guy stood up and talked for 15 minutes. The next guy stood up and talked for 15 minutes. That's how they do it, because they can remember it. And they were telling me that they used to run along the river, and you'd better not get one word wrong, because if you get this decree wrong, if you get this mission wrong, if you get these things wrong, there could be terrible consequences for the nation, for the king. So in those sorts of situations, if you had to bring them, their memories were better than ours because they had to be. And people didn't learn how to read for centuries. So their memories, the capacity for memory. And when Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis went to Asia in 1925 and 26, And they would go meet some dancers from Cambodia, and they'd get together in the afternoon and dance for them at the night in their new Cambodian dance. And the Cambodians were just like, how do they make up all these new dances? We haven't made up a new dance, and we can't remember the last time we made up a new dance. And the Westerners couldn't believe how you preserved these dances, and they were so revered, and men did them, and they were used in religion and for spirituality. But I think that's a really good question, and it goes back to Barbara's too. The body remembers, not just the mind. The body can remember things. They call it muscle memory in dancing. You know, do your muscles remember it? So I think, please.
No, go finish what you're saying. Yeah.
That's all. That I think it's both. I think both things happen.
So if the mudras are a kind of, it's like it's a code, it's a language. Is it completely consistent within the different traditions? I mean, is Indonesian mudras read in a different way to Sinhalese mudras or to Tibetan ones?
There is so much diversity. Not only that, one of the reasons I want these 4 speakers, because they don't tell history the same way. And I've told all the speakers, no one gets to correct any other speaker's history. Prajwal is going to tell the history he learned from his father. Sharon's going to tell the history she learned from her teachers. Inlis is going to tell the history he learned from his monastic superiors. And Christian's going to talk about the history he learned at school. And so I'm like, let's hear what everybody's got to say. Let's at least do that. No, Prajwal is from Nepal. He's like, mudra means nothing unless you connect your mind and your heart. So he doesn't want Westerners not to study with him because they're too freaked out about the mudras. So he's telling them, mudra doesn't mean anything until you put meaning in it. So if you can do the hand positions correctly, but you're not connecting your heart or your consciousness or building your Vajradhatu, why? Who cares if you got the mudras right? So he doesn't. And the other thing, what you're saying, Jack, about changes, we're trying to film it. It's not easy to film. You got to get permission. And like one place, yes, you can film it, but you have to buy juice for all the monks. Okay, 600 cartons of juice. So we had to give 600 cartons of juice to the monastery. And then we got to film it, Jack, and they did it like this. They did it so sloppy. It's like, no way. And so this was one of the things that you have is like, well, are they doing it well? Is it recordable? So when he asked us to record the ritual, I'm a director by profession. Sit up straight, do the movements right. Do you know how many girls want this job? You know, it's like, I'm not gonna film this till you sit up straight and do it right. You know, so, but I can't say it like that. But it's like, no, we want to reintroduce the mandala to it. We want them to do all the mudras correctly. So we have this like training camp before we document it. So I think it's everything. I think all of this is true in degrees, is what I think.
I think if you showed them the tape of their ritual, they'd look at that and go, we've got to do this again. No?
Jack, that is the ultimate rule of a dance director. You try to teach the company and they won't listen to you, show them a video of them dancing.
Yeah.
And they'll immediately fix everything. But one thing that's interesting, I'll tell you this. Ted Shawn made films in Ceylon in 1926. I took these films to Sri Lanka in 2009. They're exactly the same. The dancing is exactly the same. And here's what's amazing. Sri Lanka has been in civil war for 25 years by the time I got there. The society was all torn apart. How does the dance not get corrupted? But it didn't. And so I think it's so interesting, like those girls in South Chicago. That's a really old thing they're doing in there. So I think what I think in regard to mudra, what interests me, Prajwal would say they don't have inherent meaning. I think this has inherent meaning. I think this has inherent meaning. There's real meaning in mudra. Some is more artificial, some is less artificial, some is more mimetic. But the question is, if there is meaning in a sequence of mudras that you do to discuss the virtues of a deity while you are changing your consciousness into a different felt space, I think those mudras have inherent meaning. And if you've got all the deities on the wall, right above your head, that you're supposed to be visualizing. When I go like this, you're supposed to be having your whole body do this inside. And then when I go to the next deity, your whole body is supposed to do it. So my question is, if all of the mudra on the walls are the same as the mudra in the ritual being performed, something is consistent. And we don't know if that's true. We don't know if those correspond yet, which is so amazing that this well-researched temple, nobody has looked at the ritual at all. They've only looked at the physical properties. So we're bringing in the living practice of Buddhism and the question of transmission, which I don't think has an answer, but has a lot of insights that we can bring to the question of transmission. So that's one of the things in looking at how things stay the same. Well, if these mudra, and they're weird mudra, if these mudra, here we go, if these mudra match the wall, that's amazing. And something has stayed the same for 1,000 years. And if it stayed the same and it affects your consciousness, I think there's something important there. I know some of you do yoga. I don't know if any of you have tried Tai Chi, but yoga and Tai Chi have different, you end up with a different head. If you do Tai Chi, it's very wonderful. If you do yoga, it's very wonderful, but the result on your consciousness is different. So I'm wondering, well, what is the result on your consciousness? If the whole point is to cultivate your consciousness, and that is the point of the rituals, what is that relationship? So that's sort of what we're looking at too a little bit.
Great. Joseph, what research materials did the Dalai Lama have at his disposal to be able to know what that ritual was and then to re-import it back into the temple?
That's a very good question. And it's an interesting answer, is that sometimes we think things are a big deal and other people don't. And I'll give you an example. We think the text is so important. And one of the things Donna Lopez learned was like, they don't think of a book like we think of a book. It's just not the same thing. So one of the questions I'm asking each of the speakers is, from your profession, meaning you're an art historian, you're a monk, you're a priest, and you're a dancer. From your profession, what is your relationship to a text? What is your relationship to art? And what is your relationship to movement? And so 3 of these people that are speaking can talk about mudra as people who perform mudra all the time. And one of them can talk about mudra as someone who studied it extensively, better than anybody else. So I think that's a very, very interesting question, Alan, about which way that goes. So thank you for that question. Hey, Mom.
Joseph, the ritual that you're talking about studying or filming, how often do the monks perform it?
Once a year. Once a year. And they perform it once a year, but I think, going back to what Alan was saying about, finding out what the ritual was and how they got it. Well, when the scholars were skeptical, and I asked my monk, Tinlis is our monk spy, man, and monks all talk to each other all over the world, whatever the country. The Tibetan monks are all talking to everybody else. The monks have got their whole global network going on. A Sakya monk, the Dalai Lama is the Gelug sect. There's 4 major sects of Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. The Dalai Lama is the head of the Gelug sect. Well, the Sakya sect does a ritual that's almost exactly the same called the Kunrig ritual. Okay? Now, my monk friend says, look, we take a ritual from somebody else, we change the name, we teach it to our own people, we do it all the time. Okay? Now, Western scholars look at, oh, it's a scandal. Oh, that's the Kunrig. No, they took this and that from there. Of course we did. We're all Buddhist monks. We're all brothers. We wanted to do it. Those here, teach it to me. I'll teach it to them. We'll rename it. There's a lot of property grabbing in Buddhism. The 4 sects we want to own this, and we want to, and the fact of the matter is, Tabo is older than sectarian Buddhism. All right? So there was no sect of Buddhism in the 10th century. It was later, 12th and 13th centuries, that other sects brought it. So they believe the Vajradhatu ritual comes from Kashmir, where a lot of tantric ritual comes from. But that's how it got to Tabo. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, no, yeah. So I think that's a really good question about how we got there. And
are they doing, because I would assume this is a day-long, many day-long, 3-day-long ritual. Are they practicing it in parts?
no. One of the things, Barbara, I learned 20 years ago when I first got invited to help them was their didactic system's a mess, right? It really is a mess. And one of the reasons, I was like, what's the problem? They brought this monastery, and the head of the order brought me there like, look here, you're a dance specialist. Look what's going on. Well, I said, why is there such a difference in the level? Well, the thing was, if I don't ask my master to teach me, he doesn't teach me. They're not going to remind me to ask them. So you have to ask your teacher to be taught. And if you don't ask your teacher, they don't teach you. So there's a generational thing also. One of the things that happens too, talking about corruption, Alexander, is in a dance tradition, very often dance steps have names. Pas de bourrée, arabesque, tombe. Okay, they have names. So I don't have to say fall on your right foot. I say tombe, pas de bourrée, and every ballet dancer knows what I'm saying, all right? We made a visual glossary in 2001 of Cham Buddhist dance steps. And every dance had a name, and there's a lot of very specific head movements. Well, I learned something. That documentation wasn't for 2001, it's for now. And what we're learning is now, nobody knows the names of the steps. They learn by copying. You watch somebody and you copy, all right? So I don't know that this is a step and this step ended and this is a different step. So the current monks in some areas don't even realize the steps have names. They learn it by imitating. And another corruption that's an important one, I think, is a lot of Tantra is magic. They're magic formulas, magic mantra. And so the dances were created according to magic number series, not rhythm. Okay? Rhythm is easy to learn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're with me, you're all with me, okay? Everybody can learn things in rhythm. But if it's not in rhythm and it's in magic number series, it's a much different looking dance. It breathes, it pulses. But the monks now learn with rhythm and copying, rather than knowing the names and knowing the magic number sequences. So we kind of come in like restoring the proper performance of the mudras and restoring the sand mandala. We're just trying to bolster their performance of it. Yeah. Can't hear you, Alexander.
As I understand it, the Tibetans have their own version of acupuncture that is kind of apparently more complex than Chinese acupuncture. So would the mudras have a kind of medicinal component to them where points on the fingers relate to pressure points or to the meridians?
They do, and I took a slide out because I thought it was too complex. I should have put it back in. But it was a picture of the Japanese where every single section of the finger has a meaning. All right? But there's a lot of different ones. Like some of them are fire, water, air, space, earth. All right? So this is fire and water, this is air and water. All right? So you can combine the elements this way. But there's a lot of meanings that can be super applied to the hands. And yes, there are healing ones that are used for healing. And there is the way, you would really like Prajwal's talk. He's giving the second talk because they use the mudras very much as a way to connect with lines in the body. They kind of use the mudra. Now we're going to change the head. Now we're going to change the shoulders. Now we're going to change the torso. Now we're going to change the legs. And in the course of it, 50 minutes later, you've done your whole body. And your whole body becomes divinized in a way and felt in a different way. But he believes that very much, and he believes there's Newars have a similar kind understanding of points on the body, meridians in the body, very much so. Yeah.
Joseph, I have a question. You know, Buddhism came like 300 BC or 600, somewhere in that area, way before. He wasn't ever captured. He was symbolically shown like a chhatri or a footprint. No one actually saw him doing all these. So at some point this came in. Oftentimes they co-opt religions in, so they probably took some of them from Hinduism and whatever else. Like when you talk, your hands move.
Sorry.
So you effectively are doing mudra as you speak, which is, I think, lovely. So wouldn't it be interesting? I think it's what Jack asked, when someone bring in movements, like which animals would have been in those areas that they mimicked to copy, because some of the chantings, they copy birds. But what I think I would be very interested in, maybe another time, when you invite 4 people for your presentation in October, would it be interesting if you brought in, just in your audience, some ex-gang members, because gangs do symbols all the time. You could then study them. How is it that they came up with it? It'll give you an idea of human behavior. Just bring them in. It incorporates them into a wider world.
That's crazy idea. That's so good. We want to use sign language. We want to bring in sign language.
That's effectively what it is. They are transmitting things, but what would interest me is like 1 or 2 members started. Who starts it? Is it the leader? Is it the communicator? How did they propagate it? You may extrapolate, you know, human behavior that you can then apply. What is it that they would have done there? Because at some level, with Penelope's question about Mahabharata, they were competing with Buddhism because Buddhism eschewed traditions like this. Mahabharata, Hinduism dominated it. So it was competing with each other. I think it'd be interesting to see, does that make sense?
I think that's a great idea. I really do, because I've done some work in Italy, and Shara, I've noticed when Italians talk, one person talks and then they stop and they don't move their hands while the other person's talking. And then when they talk again, they start using their hands again. And they have a whole vocabulary of movements when they speak. I think it would be great to have, I didn't think of games. That's a great idea. But one of the things that's interesting is there's no question mudra were at the forefront of the propagation of Buddhism in art and in movement, in ritual. And it's interesting to me because there's no question the dancing was prior, but Prajwal tells me in the Nepalese tradition, at least in one point in the dance, you have to do it exactly like the painting, exactly like the iconography. So in some way, the movement, the ritual, and the paintings are all reinforcing each other. The painting becomes a kind of dance documentation. And from Prajwal's point of view, dance equals meditation. Singing means chanting mantra. Dancing means doing dancing. Meditation means dancing. So anytime you see a dancing deity in a Tibetan painting, from his point of view, that's a picture of meditation already. And so I think these are really interesting ways of looking at where the natural movement comes, but how is it that these mudra became so expansive, so meaningful, and they were used to conduct these esoteric, hidden, occult meanings? Because one thing that's interesting about the Vajradhatu and splitting the Buddha into 5 aspects, that's totally metaphysical. Before that, early Buddhism was do this prayer, do this practice, do the meditation, get enlightenment like the Buddha. And then with Mahayana Buddhism, suddenly it goes philosophical. Suddenly it's 5 aspects of the Buddhahood, and there's Buddhas of the past and Buddhas of the future. So it becomes, this is a metaphysical, practical application of mudra. So we may just be learning about the human impulse to communicate this way and where it's done. And gangs are interesting because in a gang, the reason they do it is so other people don't know what they're saying. That's why they do it. It's so that it's really a secret language. So I think it just opens up a lot of doors to the relationship of composure, meditation, human movement, integration of the psyche and the body, relationship of meditation with works of art. And if that's their intention to understand that, maybe the West has separated that and it was never really separated. So those are some of the things that we're going to be exploring over the next 4 years working on this project.
It's interesting to me that the gangs do it as a secret language, but the Italians do it as a nonverbal language.
Correct.
And they can have a conversation of just movement, and everybody knows what it is, but they don't say a word.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so what was actually happening when you were expanding the teachings of Buddhism across languages and cultures? There's such a difference between the language in India and the language in China and the language in Indonesia. They're just completely different languages. So actually, human movement would probably be more consistent than trying to make the language have the same vocalic quality that it had originally. And this goes back to that question of inherent power or inherent meaning. Does the mantra have an inherent meaning? And most of the religious would say Sanskrit alphabet is a sacred language. Each sound has a sacred meaning. So all of these questions come into the mix.
Wonderful. Okay, next week, we're getting up for a Zoom meeting at 9 a.m. because Abhishek Padar is going to present. Many of you know him, a few have been to his home. A collector, a business person, and he is building the new Museum of Art and Photography in Bangalore. So I'll remind you about time, and I'm just thrilled that he's consented to participate.
No kidding.
So happy New Year, easy fast to those who are fasting. May everybody be sealed in the book of life for at least another year.
At least.
And I love you all.
Love you too. Thank you.
Joseph.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Have a good day.
Regards to Sharon Owen.
Joseph, just brilliant.
Glad you liked it.